welcome to the Blooms and Beyond podcast, a podcast that uncovers plant history, culture, and management through the lens of science. I'm your host, Pink. How's everyone doing today? I'm doing great because I am excited to have one of my dear friend, Renee Martin, here with me today to talk about something very neat and important, the FFA program. You may have heard or will hear more about FFA from many of our speakers on this podcast and how this program brought them into horticulture. Renee has years of experience of teaching and has been involved in FFA for years. So I think it's a good idea to have her to come to our show to give our listener a full picture of this program. So let's jump right into it. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Renee Martin. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, Renee. Welcome to the podcast. But first, let's start off with the introduction. Can you tell our audience about who you are and what you do?
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. This is a great little podcast. Can't wait to see where it goes. My name is Renee Martin. I'm currently a school climate specialist at Okefenokee-Risa, but I'm also a PhD candidate in ALEC at the University of Georgia, which is Agricultural Leadership, Education, and Communication. Right now, I work with 9 districts in Southeast Georgia. I support teachers, building mental health needs for students and families, improving school climate. Before that, I was an agriculture education teacher in middle and high school for 10 years and absolutely loved it. FFA has been a part of my life for over 20 years, and everything I do, whether it's research that I'm doing, practice or service, it's all like part of that belief that ag education and FFA create a sense of purpose and belonging in a student's life and how we can build on that.
Yeah, and by the way, she's graduating next May, which is super exciting. Congrats. What first sparked your interest in horticulture and agriculture in general? Oh, did you grow up with agriculture, or is this something that you just learned or directed you to the trajectory?
So I grew up in Waycross, Georgia, which is a very rural area of the state in Southeast Georgia. I didn't grow up like row crop farming or anything like that, but my papa always had a big garden, and I remember being in the garden with him, and he always had plants and different trees. We were pulling fruits and vegetables out of the garden for dinner. But what really got me into like organized agriculture, I would say, is when I started attending middle school and I went to an agricultural magnet school. It was the Ware County School of Agricultural, Forestry, and Environmental Sciences in Maynard, Georgia. It was K-12. And so I was in 6th grade. My brother was a senior, and we had ag classes for everybody. So no matter what your goals were in life, you were taking an ag class. That kind of introduced me to actual like greenhouse management. I'd never been in a greenhouse before, even though we picked up plants from Lowe's. So I got to see that side of it. Taking care of animals. I ended up showing goats as a student and actually pigs, and that was not something I grew up with. We had a school pond. One time we had a baby gator that lived in our greenhouse until DNR could come and pick it up because it had wandered into our school pond. We had forestry plots for our school, and so we got to visit those and do some prescribed burning in high school. Just a really interesting way to attend school. And so I was there for 6 years, and it really pushed me into agriculture education and made me want to be a teacher.
Wow, that's kind of interesting because when people are talking about horticulture, we're all about plants, but in agriculture in general, except the row crops and animal science and all those essential ones, it really is a whole package. We have all different perspectives that people would normally neglect, but all those things can provide you a whole world interactions with the plants, with the people, with the animals. It's just in and out itself. It's a whole ecosystem for us as a human being. So first of all, can you explain what is FFA, and then did the experience with your high school actually introduce you to FFA?
It did. And so some of you may know, if you're a little bit older, you might have heard of the Future Farmers of America, and that's kind of the predecessing name for FFA. In the 80s, they changed it to the National FFA Organization. And so the letters don't really mean anything, but if you're an old dog, you know those letters, Future Farmers of America. But there's three parts to this program. It's called the three-circle model, and you'll see it. It looks like a modified Venn diagram. Everything overlaps. Everything is just as important as another part. And the three parts to that are your FFA experience, your classroom and lab instruction, and then what we have is a supervised agricultural experience. We call them SAEs. And so you learn in the classroom what you're going to be doing in your SAEs and in FFA. And so it builds that base of knowledge. But then the actual doing part happens when you're doing like an SAE experience. Maybe it's at a vet's office, or you're competing in the Creek speaking event for FFA. FFA is not extracurricular. It's not like just an after school activity. It is intracurricular. It is built into the curriculum. It's what you're learning in the ag class. And so that's what makes it a little bit different from some of your other organizations that you might see, because it is part of the standards for those classes.
So the FFA is generally designed for high schoolers who want to be in agriculture, right?
Well, it could be. Really, in Georgia, we've been down in the middle school for a long time. We were an early adopter of middle school ag education. And so we're trying to build not just people that are going to go into like traditional agriculture, but also people that we call like as advocates, like someone who is going to know about agriculture in any field that they do. Maybe you become a lawyer and somebody's having a dispute. You're able to talk more about an agricultural topic than you would be if you'd never been a part of FFA. Or maybe you want to go into row crop farming, or you want to own your own nursery, then you're going to have a basis in leadership that FFA brought you, business. There's lots of ways that all of these things weave into the future that our students are going to have. And actually, Georgia is again on the front edge. We are starting to have elementary agricultural classes, and they don't really have like an FFA portion to them, but what they do is just get kids excited about agriculture and learning about it. So it's a connections class for them. And we want to just expose them to agriculture as soon as possible. So they're learning where their food comes from. And they might have a lesson on forestry when it's Arbor Day. So they learn how we repopulate trees after we clear cut or do selective cutting. So they're learning about a lot of things even earlier, which is great.
Yeah, apparently I was not familiar with FFA because where I grew up, we don't have that kind of program. And then I was like, I have heard people talking to me about FFA because this is how they get into horticulture. And I was like, what is FFA? Is this something like a specific curriculum that they have to go through, just like the other classes that they have to go when they were in elementary school, middle school, and high school? Or it's a separate thing aside from their normal classes?
So when you're in elementary school, elementary ag program is just like a connections class, like you would go to PE or art or music. And so it's very broad because you're only seeing those students maybe once a week, or maybe you're seeing them for 5 weeks and then you don't see them again. So it's very broad. It's just basic agricultural topics. In middle school, our standards want you to cover a little bit of everything. So you'll have some horticultural knowledge, you'll have some animal science, you'll have some mechanics, depending on what you have at the school. But in high school, that's really where they want you to narrow your focus a little bit more. So you'll start choosing pathways, and students can choose a lot of different pathways. Some of them might go a more academic route where they're doing like an AP or a foreign language pathway. But then you also have your CTAE, your career technical ag education pathways. And that's where you have all of these nursery landscape or horticulture, animal science, but you might also have nursing or welding. So there's a pathway for anybody. But once you get in there, it's going to become more focused. So if you do a horticultural pathway, you might have a class on that's like basic agriculture. Everybody starts with that usually around in ninth grade. And then you move into like a specific horticulture class, and that's going to have you in the greenhouse or in the nursery a lot more, where you're learning those technical skills for that.
So for people that are not familiar with the FFA, I would assume there are a lot of people that don't know about it, me included, before I moved to the US. How would you describe the mission and the impact of the FFA to some of the outsiders who does not know the program?
So, the FFA mission is to make a positive difference in the lives of students by developing their potential for premier leadership, personal growth, and career success through agriculture education. And from my perspective, the mission really speaks strongly to the role of the agriculture teacher, creating meaningful learning experiences in the classroom, the lab, through FFA opportunities, building SAE programs, but then you have the motto. And to me, the motto is what really talks to what students are truly living out. And it's learning to do, doing to learn, earning to live, and living to serve. You learn those basics in your classroom, you put them into action, you kind of find your footing, and then we give back. FFA really cultivated a heart of service for me and always wanting to give back in everything I do. I mean, my family has always valued giving back to our community, to our school, to the people around us. But FFA showed me it on a different level, like a national, international level, on how our agricultural and horticultural community works together. I also got to see more behind the scenes things and how we plan, not just showing up for a work event. It was like, how do we plan with students to do an activity? How do we see the needs in our community and meet them through our programs? I don't think it just creates like an agriculturist. We're not just saying we want these kids to go into agriculture, but we want them to be like leaders who understand responsibility, service, and the impact that they can have on their community.
Yeah, and I like the model that you just mentioned. And I want to add a follow up question. Can you elaborate how does the FFA play in connection students to the agricultural career in communities? Do you have any example or stories that will help us better understanding that?
Well, first of all, I think FFA does a great job of building both technical and soft skills. And when I first started teaching, I went into the community and I said, what do you want our students to know when they leave? And people were like, a lot of times when they get to us, we can build their technical skills on the job. But if they don't show up for work, they don't show up on time, they don't know how to work in a group, then it's going to be really hard. So I think FFA shows their members and ag in general how to communicate clearly, how to collaborate, managing their time, responsibilities, and how to lead groups of their peers. So they're ready to step into leadership roles when the management opportunity opens up. And that's a lot of our CTSOs, our career tech student organizations, but I think FFA does it really great.
Do you have a story that can elaborate the FFA connection between the students and preparing their agricultural career and the service for the community?
So I think one of the really cool things that I have seen over time, as we've seen like natural disasters happen, I think back to when I was a freshman at ABAC and we were watching Hurricane Katrina happen in real time. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is one of the biggest things in history. Immediately when that started happening, FFA jumped in and it was like they were raising money, they were helping people get supplies. We've seen that over and over again when we've had tornadoes out west. We had schools that were completely demolished, and our FFA chapters immediately, you had students saying, we want to do something. So they're doing clothing drives, they're doing school supply drives. So they're seeing that service in action. But then on the skill side, when we had Hurricane Helene that just destroyed parts of Georgia and North Carolina, I saw FFA students and their ag teachers out in the community teaching people real life skills. There were so many people that bought generators that had never run a generator in their life. So they were teaching classes to small groups of people. Here's how you run a generator safely. We need to have it outside. You need to use this type of fuel. You need to buy it from these locations. They were showing people how to use chainsaws correctly and making sure that you don't want a tree rolling over on you because you cut it incorrectly in the community in a very real way. And I think that's what FFA does, is it doesn't just teach you the skill that you're going to take a test on. It teaches you a skill that you're going to use for the rest of your life, even if you don't go into agriculture. There were people that were like, I remember taking a class with you and the people came in, taught us how to use chainsaws, taught us how to work on small engines and do maintenance. and the skills that you're learning in FFA stay with you.
Yeah, I still remember during the Hurricane Helen, people are desperately needing for all sorts of resources. I remember you gather all those goods and doing all the drives and just to deliver those things to the community that needed them the most. I was calling to check on some of the growers in South Georgia because that's where people got the most impacts during Hurricane Helen. And one of the growers were asking me, say, hey, he's like, oh, Payne, I got 2 generators. If you know anybody who is looking for generators, let me know. And I know people who are looking for generators. So they made the arrangement just drive down the way and deliver the generators to help them. And they were like, oh, whatever we can do to help you. And they know this is a big deal and they want to make sure everybody is okay. I think that's really a moment to show the impact of the program and for us as a community. So that's a really good way to show the kids that you need to care about your community. So I guess for you and me and even Michael, that's the reason why we love this industry so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit about the importance of the SAEs and how they can prepare the students for the real world?
Sure. SAEs are supervised agriculture experiences. We want students actually getting an experience in agriculture, but it's not just, oh, I fed my dog at my house. These are supervised either by maybe a community member or their ag teacher. And as ag teachers, we're actually going out to visit them. My first year teaching, I actually had to ride a ferry to Sapelo Island to view a kid's project. And I'm 22 years old and I'm like, I've never done this before. So it can be maybe you're riding a side by side out in the middle of the woods because the kid's SAE is a food plot. But one that stands out to me is I had a student, which is very shy, that she always wanted to be a vet. She would always write down veterinarian as things she wanted to do. She was in one of my animal science classes. And the SAE program allowed her to contact a local veterinarian and say, I'd like to do my hours with you. Can I come in and get some work? And of course, when you're that person, you start with like, you're cleaning the cages. And so you're seeing like all of the sides of the vet. But she ended up working with him for 3 years. And so as he saw that she was very competent and capable, he started hiring her on as like a little intern, and she actually got paid for some of it. So it was really neat to see how that, when you're a student, people want you to come and experience things. They want to teach you because they want to build the future of their industry. They don't want to do that when you're a competitor later on. So SAEs really open up the door because most students are not going to just say, oh, I think I'd like to do an internship and take the initiative to go do that. But SAEs really open up the bridge for the community to pour into your program and into your students.
But over the years of your teaching experience, can you share one of the most memorable stories about students, how they started with FFA program, and how FFA kind of shaped their future or career in that way?
I can think of so
I
many.
know.
When you're the teacher, you don't want to be like, oh, I made this huge impact on this kid. It was me. It was our program. But I will say I've had multiple students. I'm not saying it was just their FFA time, but I do think it helped them that were part of my middle school program that are now students at UGA. And they do contribute some of the learning how to speak in front of people to competing in the agri-science fair. And they actually made it to the national level and did very well. So they learned how to do research at a very young age. They learned how to talk to people in research settings. We were Zooming with people in Costa Rica who had knowledge on the subjects we were doing. So they got to interact with adults very early in that research type setting. And now they're actually foundation scholars at UGA and they're doing their own research. And they talk about that a lot. We also have a lot of students in the ag area that will do the Young Scholars program. And a lot of them have been part of FFA programs and they find out about it. So they're getting into these research opportunities early. I also contribute FFA. One of the big things was helping build our family. My husband and I do not biologically have children, but we do have what we consider like an adopted son.
Yeah.
We call him Baby Michael, even though he's a grown man now.
I know.
He's taller than my husband, but people know him as Baby Michael. And he was one of my students when I taught at Ware County. He was being raised by a grandmother. She passed away when he was early in college, but she really believed in FFA. And so we could at last minute be like, Michael, we need somebody to step in for this. And she would immediately have his official dress ready to go so we could pick it up on the bus on the way out of town. And she saw the value of it. And when she passed away, he really kind of folded into our family. And since then he's our son.
I know.
He wishes me happy Mother's Day. He's a big part of it. He became an ag teacher. So we talk about how teaching is in the family. And then he now works at the FFA camp in Covington and is a program specialist there. That all because of FFA. We would not have known that. I wouldn't have known his family. We wouldn't have had those experiences if I was just like his English teacher.
Yeah.
But it was because of FFA and taking him on overnight trips and getting to talk to him in a deeper way than you would as someone who saw this student for one time, because you have those students year after year after year. And really, I'll say that's what built my research that I'm doing now in mental health and behavior management, because those ag teachers do have those different experiences and those long-term experiences with students. Because if you work with your middle school, I saw kids in 6th grade that then became my students in 9th grade, that then I had until 12th grade. So you're seeing them really grow up and become people. It's so cool to see how they change and they grow through agriculture education programs.
Yeah, I know baby Michael. I was saying his pictures, and Michael has told me everything about it. Well, baby Michael is way bigger than real Michael than
Yes.
you. I was like,
Much taller.
yeah, it's such a beautiful story about the connections, the bond that people will build during those experiences. Because I think at the end of the day, it's the bond, it's the relationship that people are building, whether you are in the community or in whatever field that you are in, it's all about people. So I really love the story because you're experiencing as an art teacher for over the years and you have seen all those challenges and struggles for the art teacher, for the students, and that kind of lead to your research today as a PhD candidate. Can you elaborate a little bit by telling us how did you connect the dots from the teacher's perspective to the research perspective?
So for the last 6 years, I've been working in wraparound. So when I got out of the ag classroom, I moved into a regional position at Okefenokee-Risa. I've been doing wraparound, which is anything non-academic, food, water, shelter, clothing. But it really builds on the skills that I got as an ag teacher, where we build that community. We're always resource management. So when we had families that needed food, I already knew some of the farmers to reach out to and said, can we come out and do some gleaning? Can we get some boxes of blueberries or yams or whatever you're growing now to be able to feed these families? It was that collaborative nature. I also saw how hard it was to be an ag teacher and see all the things that we see. I mean, you're 22 years old. I told you I was on a ferry going to visit a kid's house. And then sometimes you get to kids' houses and you're like, man, I didn't know this is where they came from. I didn't know that this was the community that they came out of. When I was teaching in Athens, Clark County, the police called one of our groups. It was like the Iron Triangle, because a lot of people get arrested there. They have a lot of drug activity. And that's where those students were coming from. I knew that I wanted mental health to be at the helm, and I wanted to do research that would help our ag teachers not only understand where students come from, but know when those students need help. And how can we make our classrooms and our SSA programs a safe space for students to feel like they can be themselves and to know when we need to get them help. So one of the things that I've done is talked with our pre-service ag teachers to see where they feel like those gaps are in the training that they get in their undergraduate program. What did they wish they'd done more? A lot of times it's not, I wish I knew more about plants. It's, I wish I knew more about building relationships. I wish I knew more about the mental health struggles that students have, or what is just like a kid being a kid. And that's totally fine. You know, I had 7th graders. If you've ever taught 7th grade, you know that is just a different breed. And the parents would be like, I don't even recognize, where did my sweet little 6th grader go? And I'm like, they'll be back in 8th grade. they'll be back to a little calmer, but seventh grade is just a big thing. So you just know you have to have more empathy. You have to work with those students in a different way. And we found that that's not really happening in some of our education programs. So we're trying to build some of those things in. And it's just been very interesting to talk with people across the country and see that the struggles we have with students are everywhere, and everybody is looking for ways to build relationships. And I think when you have pieces of a program like SAEs and FFA competitions, that you are able to build connections that can help steer kids on a path that maybe they wouldn't have gone down. Maybe they come from a really rough neighborhood and they're getting all of these ideas in their head that this is how I have to be because I come from this. And things like FFA can show them you don't have to do that. You can forge your own path. You can do what you want to do. And it gives them an outlet to be able to do that, and gives them a foundation where they feel confident to make the right choices in their life.
Wow, that's really something very impactful because basically you're changing the life of some people, some kids. If they haven't exposed to FFA, they are out of option. But FFA
Hmm.
does provide them, like you said, outlets or the new options for them to go get a better life, basically. When you were an ACT teacher back then, before you decide to go get your PhD, did you run into the same trouble or the challenges that you are researching on right now?
I did. I found that I could be a dysregulated mess. I'd even apologize to students sometimes. I'm like, hey, I remember that time that you were tardy, and instead of me just having some empathy, I kind of got onto you, and it made a situation that could have just been very much like, hey, you came in late. This is what we're doing. Let's get started. More difficult for that student. And as I taught longer, of course, I'm not fighting a kid over a pencil. I just got pencil parking. You grabbed a pencil when you needed it. That's not a hill I'm willing to die on. But sometimes when you come in the program, they're like, don't smile till Christmas. And that's not the way you have to be. You don't have to do that. You can smile with the kids, you can joke with the kids, you can build relationships, and they're still going to learn. They're going to have a good time, and your class is going to become a safe space. And I just realized that I wanted our students that are coming through our programs to learn that earlier. So when they get in the classroom, they don't have to go through those years of not smiling till Christmas and realizing that's really not how you should build your program. And so I wanted them to have skills that I didn't get until I was much later in my career. So that's one of the things that we're trying to build, is just capacity for seeing students as people from day one. Kids still the same way. So how do we build that empathy in our student teachers so when they get in the classroom, they're able to recognize that? And it's all part of behavior management. Keeping kids in the classroom is a really important thing. We don't want to be sending them out because they have behavior issues. And so classroom management is one thing, but how do we look at individual student behaviors and keep them in our programs and in our classroom and find ways that we can help them regulate themselves? And whether it's let's get some water, let's take a minute to count to 10, let's maybe have a brain break for everybody. Sometimes when I noticed that everybody was just kind of energized, we went on a trip to the greenhouse. Did we need to do anything in the greenhouse? Probably not. But there's always weeds to be pulled. There's always something that you can find to do to get some of that energy out in students. But if you don't know how to see your class and look for that, especially as a young teacher, you may not know to put those interventions in.
For a young ACT teacher, when they first started the job as ACT teacher, as human being, we are learning along the way, and what kind of things that they need to avoid to prevent them from loving what they do, because
I
sometimes that can be a big problem. You have to love what you do.
You do. And I think everybody goes into it loving what they do, and they just find that they're burned out really early because they see these ag programs that have been around for decades that are just thriving, and they're winning national competitions. They're winning in proficiencies. Their CDE teams are amazing. They also make $20,000 off their greenhouse sale, and they have kids showing livestock, but they've cultivated that over decades, over years, and those teachers have a lot more experience. I think year one, you have to pick what your program is really about, do well at those things, and then you can start adding things on. Give yourself grace, give the kids grace, know what is really important for you. Don't die on the hill of the pencil. Give them the pencil. Don't feel like if a kid does something that it is targeted at you. People have bad days, and sometimes their students are going to say things. It may be nothing against you. They might have had an argument with a friend on the bus and they're just taking that out in your class. And so know when to like shrug things off, just like a manager at a workplace would. They know when to shrug things off and when to actually double down and deal with them, that you are not planning to grade or think you will have time to grade. Not everything needs to be graded by hand individually. I know that my first couple of years, I would go home and I would just have weekends worth of work to grade. And then I realized, you know what? Instead of them doing 5 worksheets on this, we can do a project. And I can grade that project in class as it goes and make things more meaningful. You don't need to have all the busy work. If you have meaningful experiences for students, that's way more important than having 5 quizzes on busy work. So, how do you build that meaningful experience for your students? And that's going to make you want to stay in the classroom more because you're going to see students making those connections and you're not going to get burnt out as fast.
I know in general, in horticulture and in agriculture, we are facing challenges of recruiting more students. Can you share some of the challenge that the FFA members or program are facing, and what are the ways to help us out?
I think one of the things that FFA members are facing now, and we've kind of talked about this, is there's so many pressures that go beyond academics. Like when I was growing up, I mean, the internet was kind of new. You did get on it sometimes, but it wasn't a space where you lived. But now you are on social media, whether you want to be or not. And I think that they're more aware of the stressors of the world. Years ago, you had to watch the news to know what was going on. And now the news is 6 inches from your face at all time on a personalized screen. So you're seeing all of that. So there is some keeping up with the Joneses, some pressure to do that. It's the same for our teachers. You know, some of them are really good at social media. And so when they're doing their plant sales, they're like having their kids do dances in the greenhouse. And they're like making a rap about every single plant in the greenhouse and why you should buy it. And, you know, needs this much sun. And if that's not your thing, that's totally fine. You don't have to do all of that to be an amazing ag teacher. So I think helping students and teachers realize that what they see on social media doesn't have to be the reality for themselves. And also, people are usually putting their best foot forward on social media. So you may not have seen that it took them 47 takes to get that cute dance that they did. Building that out and just letting people know that they can follow their own path is really important. And also, there's just so much out there that students still don't know about when it comes to jobs. I
Right.
think we knew about a handful of jobs. The coolest job that you could think about getting when I was younger was a marine biologist. I don't know why they chose that to be like the highlight of the jobs, but like maybe you could be a marine biologist. I was like, that sounds like the coolest job ever. But now we have so many cool jobs across agriculture. I mean, a friend of mine just got a huge job with Tennessee Agriculture and she does ag communications. I wouldn't have even thought, oh my gosh, she could be a high level person in ag with a communications degree, but that is huge now. So I think also making students become critical thinkers and these are the skills that I have. I really like these parts of agriculture. Now, how do I merge those together? How do I find a job that I love and not one that I just tolerate because somebody told me about it when I was in 9th grade and I decided, I guess I'll go be that. That'll be what I do. And I'm sure y'all see that in the horticulture department. I mean, the research that's coming out now with lighting is amazing. And that's stuff that 20 years ago was not happening. HPS was the thing, and now LEDs are huge and it's just constantly changing. So I think making people understand that even what you're teaching your kids in 9th grade, there's going to be different stuff when they're seniors. There's going to be new jobs and new things that they can look into.
Yeah, I'm glad that you kind of mentioned the change throughout the years. And I mean, we're in an era of AI and we're in an era of climate change, and all those advanced technologies just keep coming to a level where we don't understand in the first place. But how is FFA adapting those modern issues? I mean, those are just common issues for this whole society, for the whole world. How does FFA incorporating those issues and helping the next generation to be prepared for those challenges?
So I think agriculture education and FFA in general are evolving all the time. And so we are always looking for how can we connect our students to the real world. I was very big in agri-science fair as a teacher, and I always told my students, you have to have a real problem. What is the actual problem you want to do? I do have some teachers that no longer trust me because one time I had a student make brownies out of cricket flour, and then had them do a taste test. And so then they were like, I'm not doing any more of your taste tests. You fed us goat milk ice cream one time. You've now fed us crickets. But that is a legitimate problem in the world about people not getting enough protein. And when we're talking about climate change and the landscape in places is drastically different than it was 20, 30 years ago. So how are we evolving with that? And so FFA and ag education are they're really changing the way students learn. It's not just here's a bunch of brain dump about agricultural facts. It's how do we form these critical thinkers? How do they become problem solvers that understand the whole food system, not just I'm going to raise cattle? What does that whole system look like from, feed and grain to raise the cattle on to where your cattle are going to the marketing to getting it in the grocery store to getting it on people's plates? They're looking at global markets like we've never seen before. And they're also really focused on community well-being and how are we producing things that are helping our community, whether it is food or fiber production, or when the pandemic hit, horticulture blew up. Everybody was home. Everybody wanted plants. They want beautiful yards. There's like, how can we save the bees? And so building a more consumer driven critical thinking student where they understand all the processes. And so anything that comes up, any problem that pops up, they're able to think through those problems and come up with solutions. It's not just we've only taught them you need to be sustainable, but why? Why is sustainability a thing? So they're looking with the end in mind. And I think that's how FFA and ag education are fitting into that whole framework for agriculture.
Yeah, because I think the critical thinking is definitely one of the key skill set that every student I'm helping or everyone in the whole world needs to have. Because normally, this is what I tell my grad students or my students to say, okay, you are gonna say one problem and then you're gonna ask yourself several questions. What, why, and how. You identify the problem, what it is, and then why you care, why this problem relate. And like you said, it's applied research where it's a real world problem. And then how do you solve those problems? So if you can answer all those questions and you got the critical thinking skill set all in there, and then it doesn't matter where you go and what job you do, if you have the mindset, then you will be able to solve whatever problem that you're gonna encounter down the road.
Exactly.
Yeah. But speaking of the change, I think in general, education or higher education in general is evolving. But there are more and more online sources that provides knowledge and skills. What do you think the future of agriculture education looks like, and where do you think FFA would fit in there? Because right now, like the AI generated information, or it's just everywhere. How can we embrace that, and how FFA gonna fit in?
I think that one of the big things is teaching kids the correct knowledge so that when they see something that is AI created, then they know, hey, that's not. I feel like that's my job. That's my role at my job because I work with a lot of people that are older than me and they share things. And I feel like, hey, that was AI. There is not actually a plant that looks like this that is, 5 times the size of a building. That's not how that works. And so creating that knowledge base where people can critically think and say, let's look at this deeper. Is this correct? Is this what we need to be looking at? I also think we're getting some things like Breeze ETA that are agricultural based so that people can use AI in a responsible way. That's not just like a program like Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude that is pulling from all areas and maybe pulling from non-factual websites. So I think we're going to see a lot more AI that is specific for different programs. AI is here. We have to adapt with it. There's some people that just kind of stuck their head in the sand and said, I'm not doing it. No AI. I'm not having it. But we're not going to be able to do that. And so we're going to have to train our students how to use it correctly. I always like to say use it for organization, not creation, because it will create random things. If you've ever asked it to help you with a citation, it will sometimes make up things. And you're like, that's not the citation I put in here, but thank you so much. I think as things come out, we're just going to have to build students again that think critically and are able to recognize that things are not as they seem all the time.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a trend that not just for FFA kids, but all the students in general, just tell them that they need to be able to differentiate what's real and what's not. And one of the things that my students do this year is to create the document for a specific plant. And they are going to do that. And I know for a fact that a lot of students grab information from AI, and some of those are AI generated. But I added another step so that they would know sometimes AI does not do a better job than the end. So I asked them to do another version of edit with track change and go in there, really read through, and then do the corrections that they need it to be. Even
Man,
if it's just AI generated, it doesn't mean it's all correct.
yeah. Or at least you know how to research the behind the scenes. Maybe I don't know the answer, but I want to make sure that if I ask it a question, how many cows per person are there in Uruguay? I see the answer, but now I need to go check that answer and make sure that I've looked at sources that are real
Mm-hmm.
sources and that they are also research based. I think about when I was a student at Tifton in college and I did an extension internship one summer. And back then in the early 2000s, you would literally get calls and it would be a woman that would say, Hey, I have 7 apples. What can I make with 7 apples? And you would go to a filing cabinet and you would sift through it and you would find apples and you would pull out the folder that was talking about apples and you would say, you could make an apple cobbler. Here's the recipe for an apple cobbler. Here's the recipe for an apple pie. Bake it at 350 at this. If I told students that I did that, they would say, did you grow up in the 1800s? But that was just 20 years ago
Yeah.
that we were still helping. And now AI, you could put in, I have 7 apples and some cinnamon, and they would give you 40 recipes for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's some really cool things that it can do, but we need to figure out nothing says that those recipes taste good. Nobody's tried those recipes. So you can't just take it at face value, even for the simple stuff, because it's just giving you information. It doesn't have that human connection. So we have to teach students how to make the human connection that they can provide be better than the AI.
Yeah, for every technology revolution, I always think just use that as a tool instead of something that you just rely on. Everything is a tool. If you can master the tool, that will actually make you a person that you will never lose job. And that's the skill set that you need to have. Afraid,
Mhm.
don't be afraid of it, embrace it and master it.
Yeah, I agree.
So, with your research for the mental health, for the ACT teacher and FFA, and all of that are coming from FFA, what is your next step? What's the thing that excites you the most in that route?
Well, I will say it's about to be conference season, and I absolutely love that. I do work part time, but I do still get to take off and go to some conferences. So we're going to be in Costa Rica and Cuba and Kentucky, getting to see what other people are talking about and talking about my research with other people and hearing different ways of thinking about it. That is my most exciting time. I just love collaboration. Anytime that I can build in collaboration, that's so exciting. And then after May, when I graduate, the sky is the limit. Who knows what's going to happen after that? But I'm really excited for the spring and just to get to talk to people that are in the same realm as me, because there's not a lot of people in the country doing mental health and ag education. We do have some people here doing farmer stress, and I am a part of that. The Georgia Agricultural Wellness Alliance and I are partnering. We'll be doing some presentations together in January, but it's still so new. So anytime I can be around people, I just think it's the best. I just come away really energized and fulfilled to do more research, to dive deeper, to get this dissertation written. And those little letters behind my name will be very exciting.
Yeah, I think what you're doing with your research is really something would be pretty impactful for agriculture in general, because a lot of times agriculture people, they were just neglected the fact that they're with their mental health, and because they have something else more important that they need to be taken care of, like, okay, it's raining, I got to go harvest my crop and things like that. But how do you plan to implementing or your research results to help our agriculture stakeholders?
I think starting with our ag teachers, that's really where I'd like to build, and building programs in agriculture education that can provide for their students. So those students that may one day become producers have a better idea of what good mental health and wellness looks like. And so they can have a balance. We see high suicide rates in certain areas of agriculture, and we definitely want to lower those. So building capacity in your students early on. I also teach youth mental health first aid and QPR, which is a suicide prevention program. And both of those help people see not just in themselves when they might be struggling, but in others. Because again, our community is very close knit, and you are noticing when somebody else is struggling. We really pushed into the community after Hurricane Helene because we had people that lost everything. Some of the people in Coffee County lost chicken houses. Even with insurance, they'll never get those back. There's too much money, it's too much in costs and time. And so, how do you check on your friends constantly to make sure that they're in the right headspace after something like that happens? Talking with agribility on people that maybe get injured and how can we keep them on the farm, because mental health is really hard after somebody has like an accident. Making sure that we're providing accessible materials for people that may speak other languages, especially on some of our farms. We have a lot of Spanish speakers. And so providing materials for them and trainings in their native language from either native speakers that can answer very intricate questions or people that are able to do that. I just think that's super important that everybody has access to it. It's not just for this limited group of people. I think we've done that too long, where it's like only these people talk about it. Everybody has to be talking about it for us to make a difference.
We need to be open access. So, what do you hope our listeners to take away from the story and the message of FFA? What are some of the last comments and words that you want to leave for our audience today?
I think the first thing I say is just do it. Just join FFA, give it a shot, see if it's for you. Join other CTSOs as well. Just have something that allows you to get experiences outside the four walls of your school, that puts you in spaces that you would never have been in. I hope that people see how deeply ag education and FFA support the whole student. I work in the Office of Whole Child, and we're always talking about school climate. And I think, man, these things that ag teachers do every single day is exactly what we want all teachers to do. They are working on not just teaching the curriculum, but how does it relate to society, and how do we make students good members of society and be able to critically think. Just however you can get involved. Even if you're a senior in high school right now, there's still time for you to join an ag class next semester, or when you get to college. I had a friend that became an ag teacher. He'd never had an ag class. But when he got to college, he heard about collegiate FFA. He joined then. We have some great programs at UGA. The Hort Club is amazing. We have a lot of our students that are in that. And so connect into others that are in this field and just build that collaborative nature.
So with that in mind, if people want to look out for more information on FFA or your mental health research work, where do you recommend them to go find more information about those?
So there's always the National FFA and the Georgia FFA website, and you can Google those. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. I try and keep things updated and posted there. I welcome for you to find me on there. It's Renee Martin. We have a Facebook page for Okefenokee RISA, and I do post things that I'm working on through School Climate and Whole Child for my work. And then the University of Georgia ALEC department has a great Instagram that you can follow. And the GSA, the Graduate Student Association one, is pretty good too. I ran that for a couple years. So I really think utilizing social media is the way to do it so that you can stay connected to people.
Yeah, well, thank you, Renee. I really thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us, those FFA and all those wonderful stories. I really think the band, the relationship, the community are the essential part to connect everyone together. And that's really how we should emphasize on. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for taking your time talking to me today.
Thank you for doing this podcast. This is wonderful. I'm so excited to see how it turns out.
Thank you. Conversation like this only happen when you support the show. For more information and find ways to support us, please go to bnbpod.com, bnbpod.com. If you like what you are hearing, spread the word and share this podcast with the people you love. Make sure you hit that subscription button and give a review for the podcast. And as always, go check out the show notes to learn more about this topic and other topics we featured on the show at bnbpod.com. Thank you for listening. Till the next time, stay healthy and go plants.